Welcome to Storyforge Live. I'm Barry Chandler and I'm here with Hayley Boning. We are the co-founders of Storyforge, and we are here every Wednesday and Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We have spent the last 6 years at Storyforge helping businesses be more meaningful, relevant, and impactful to those that they serve so that they can be preferred, they can be loved, and they can be chosen irrespective of the economy or the competition. And I know we're in very different times at the moment. The world has changed, and therefore so must we. We know that expectations of employees and customers are very different now than they were a month ago and certainly a year ago. So we know we need a different approach. So every Wednesday and Friday at 11 a.m., we meet here for what we're calling our office hours to share with you examples of businesses who are proving why they are relevant, why they are meaningful, and diving into how they are doing that and how they're managing to cut through the clutter and stand out. So we believe that businesses still have an opportunity. They have a great opportunity and indeed an obligation to change lives, to change communities, and to change the world. But to do that, we all need a plan, a process, and an approach. So we're going to use this time every Wednesday and Friday to dive into that. Hopefully, you'll be able to take some nuggets away and apply to your own business. So Hayley, thanks again for joining this morning. It's good for us to get stuck into this twice a week.
Yes, absolutely. And great to catch up. Our bi-coastal nature of Storyforge means that we see each other on screens and in little boxes multiple times a week. So it's always good to see you, Barry.
I like that we dressed up as if we have somewhere to go.
Yes.
Nowhere to go whatsoever.
Collared shirts, they're going to be all the rage this week.
A 10-foot radius to work within, but still.
Exactly.
So today we're going to dive into one of our clients that we are privileged to work with. And I know, Hayley, you've got some great insights that you've gleaned over the past few weeks as we've worked with this client, but also observed the changes and the reaction they've had to the changing landscape that faces them. And that client is Highlights for Children. And you've got some thoughts for us on how they've been weathering the change and the storm over the past few weeks.
Yes, absolutely. And as I share these thoughts and these insights about Highlights, I also want to remind everyone that this is a live show, and we're here also to take your questions. So Barry and I are sharing insights and stories and reflections that we've had as we've been talking over the last week, and things that we've learned from our clients. But if you have questions, please type your question into the chat box there on the right. You can send us an email at purpose@storyforge.co, either during this live show or anytime during the week, and we'll take your questions live during our office hours every Wednesday and Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So, as Barry mentioned, one of the clients that we've been working with over the last year or so is Highlights for Children. And we often talk with our clients and friends and customers about this ability to use meaning and use a real clear sense of your own meaning as a filter for thinking and decision making in regular times, but also especially during times of crisis. And there's something I thought was really interesting about the way Highlights used its vision and its purpose and its meaning and its understanding of its own DNA as a filter for thinking when this crisis that we're all in really began. And it's when it began in China. So Highlights has children that it serves all over the world, and China is a very big market for them. So they saw this coronavirus in China very, very early on. And what they did was immediately when that decision was made in China to shut the schools down, they had a pilot of a new product going, something called the Highlights Digital Library, which is a digital platform with thousands and thousands of stories that have been published in Highlights and in their High Five publications over the years. And they rolled that out as broadly as they could, as quickly as they could, through their partners in China. And they did it for free. They did that because they were using their vision and their purpose as a filter for thinking. They knew that they wanted to reach as many kids as possible, as many kids as their partners could reach at home, because all these kids were going to be stuck in this homeschooled environment. They were there in isolation. They had to practice social distancing. It was pretty dramatic and pretty quick. So they moved very, very quickly to release this digital library and try to get it out to as many kids as possible across China. And as a result, they have thousands and thousands of new potential customers, of new folks across across China, who are now exposed to highlights, who are using the highlights digital library to do homeschooling and to interact with the highlights products. So an amazing opportunity. We've seen this with other businesses that have used this particular crisis as a filter for thinking. The other one that comes to mind for me is an organization called Bandcamp. For those of you who are musicians might know that Bandcamp right now has decreased their margins to 0. So typically they take a small margin on every song or every album sold, but with this recognition that musicians, who are their key customer, their key stakeholder, because of the struggles that this has put musicians through in the service industry, that they have decided that Bandcamp decided that they were going to suspend the margin that they're taking for the period when everyone is stuck at home. Again, increasing the number of people who know about Bandcamp, who are accessing Bandcamp, and providing a win in the terms of revenue, increased revenue for their musicians.
Two examples of longer term thinking than just what we have to do this week, but also we've heard many examples of businesses who are both, well, there's two sides to it. I think there's the businesses that are struggling to keep the lights on right now, and then those that aren't in as dire a situation, but maybe haven't thought about the longer term implications of what they do. And so I think both of these businesses demonstrate that they're using a filter for thinking about their decision making, not just how much money can we make now or how do we keep the lights on right now, but rather, well, why are we here? What's our real purpose and our objective here? And they're making decisions based on that. That seems to be allowing them and others to make different decisions than if they didn't have that filter for thinking.
Yeah, it's a good point, Barry. And I think that it's important to remember, and we talk about it a lot, that having this greater sense of meaning and purpose is only useful if you also have revenue and profitability, because profit without purpose and without meaning might be meaningless, but to have purpose without profit it's just a dream, right? So these businesses are balancing those two things. And what's interesting, I think we've seen with a lot of our clients, is that when they can release themselves from what I'll call the tyranny of or, right? We have the strategies that we've had in place, or we might have something else. When they can see see the opportunity, see the possibilities, and rethink strategies while staying true to purpose and mission and those things that should never change about the business, that's where we see creativity, we see innovation, we see more strategies. Highlights, for example, we know that they've seen, and they've said publicly, a very significant increase in demand for their products that aren't their magazine. So the Highlights team has a line of products like workbooks and summer workbooks and getting ready for pre-K, getting ready for kindergarten, fun with purpose, explicit learning objectives. And those things have sold incredibly well on Amazon and through their site, as parents are right now looking for help. They're looking for help with their kids, because everybody's a homeschooler right now. And we know, you and I, because we have a lot of friends with small kids at home, how incredibly frustrating that is. There's a desperate need for the products that Highlights creates. So they are seeing revenue grow up, but it's giving them this opportunity to think differently about strategies. So Kent Johnson talked a couple of weeks ago about how they're just completely rethinking intellectual property. So they had a program called Highlights at Home, which was a frequent publication of helpful digital content, along with inspirational messages from Highlights Chief Purpose Officer, this amazing woman named Chris Cully. If you do not follow her on LinkedIn, I highly recommend you follow her on LinkedIn, regardless of whether you're a parent or teacher or a nonprofit that works with kids. She shares just the most remarkable and valuable content out there. But this Highlights at Home program, it's got humor, it's activities you can use at home. And they worked very, very quickly to launch that on a much faster time frame to their consumers directly through social and email. But also to make that content available to partners who want to provide it to nonprofits and to other companies so that they can provide it directly to their customers. And that changing thought that they had about the rules of intellectual property, making this free and trying to get it out as quickly as possible, was also using that filter for their thinking, rather than thinking about the strategies that they'd employed before.
What else have you observed from highlights that they've done in the past few weeks because of this filter for thinking, and that maybe they wouldn't have done had they not had this one page that everybody was on together?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think one of the things I appreciate about highlights so much is that as they worked to define this one page, they were very open to thinking about stakeholders, and those people who have a stake in the success of their business and those people that the business has a stake in. So in addition to identifying their customers, their clients, schools, teachers, parents, they were also very, and they naturally, I think, are very good about thinking of their staff and their employees as an important stakeholder group. So Kent and Chris and the team, Julie, they have all stepped up the amount of internal communications and internal engagement that they're doing. So multiple times a week, Kent and Julie and the rest of the team are getting on Zoom calls with the entire team, updating them on what's happening in the business, operating with an incredible amount of transparency about what's working well and what's not, encouraging, recognizing, celebrating people who are working really, really hard to deliver to that vision and purpose. So I do see this distinction between companies right now, some who are so driven by fear and focus on the bottom line that they're forgetting sometimes the importance of thinking about all their stakeholders at a time like this.
I'm constantly reminded that there are businesses for whom long-term planning right now seems like a luxury. And so it does seem, though, that with highlights as an example, and we have other examples with businesses that we work with, that they have two eyes, and they have one eye on the present and they have one eye on the future, but they're not focusing overly on any one of those. They're aware that there's a balance, and that if they don't keep the lights on, there won't be a future. But at the same time, if we just make short-term decisions for this week or for next week, perhaps there also won't be a future. And so it is that balance of getting everybody on the same page right now, and then deciding, well, what do we have to do immediately because there are immediate needs, but then also what space can we carve out to make decisions or to think about how this is affecting us over the next 6 months, year, or 10 years. And the likes of highlights, 70 years of business that they've been around, and so they've weathered some storms over the years, and I'd like to think that the businesses that have survived over the long term are those that have had as much, if not more, of a focus on that longer term vision than just what they have to do today.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to work with an entrepreneur many years ago who I remember the first time business got really, really bad and the numbers looked terrible. And he almost had this glint in his eye, this gleam in his eye. And I couldn't quite figure out why he was so excited that things were so tough. And what I realized in observing him and watching him lead during that process was that times of crisis make things like strategic conversations far less esoteric, right? It's not sitting around navel gazing and thinking about some hypothetical future. It's real challenges that are hitting the business right now that require us to ask really, really difficult questions of ourselves, and ask them quickly and move through that process quickly. It's not a multiple month data collection process. It's got to be fast, it's got to be valuable, it's got to be meaningful, because we have to move now. And that's, I wouldn't say it's delightful, but it certainly makes the work much more relevant.
So we're here every Wednesday and Friday because we believe that businesses are struggling to perhaps find that hope and that optimism in light of the very sudden changes that have happened. But we know that there are many businesses that are able to get beyond that, and they're using a framework for thinking, and they're using an approach that is not, it's not always easy, but there's a simple set of steps that help businesses think through this, so that there's long-term planning and long-term perhaps pursuit and alignment with a vision that's greater than just profitability alone. So if you've got any questions at any time, please feel free to pop them in the comment box, and we'll get them right here on what we're calling our office hours. Or as Haley mentioned earlier, you can anytime email us at purpose@storyforge.co, and we'd love to dive into the particular challenges that you're dealing with in your business. But we started this because we know that businesses need direction, they need assistance, and perhaps they need sometimes somebody from the outside objectively to look at it and say, well, I see that you're focused on this one thing all the time, but have you thought about this thing over here? And when we have those conversations the most with clients, it's when there isn't a filter for thinking about decision making, that sometimes we become the filter for thinking, and that's not sustainable. Businesses need their own filter for thinking, which we always talk about, this one page, this one meaningful page that gives clarity on where we're going, why we're going there, what people need from us, and how we uniquely intend to get there. So that's really like when we share examples of highlights or other businesses, they're working from this one page, aren't they? It's not that there's a massive 800-page Bible. It's no, let's simply get on this one page so that we can deal with the most confusing and challenging of times with it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think you and I, when we first came together under the Storyforge banner, a lot of it was in reaction to things that we'd seen. And one of the things we both talked about with great disdain in our voice were brand books. These massive strategic documents that a significant amount of time and effort and resource and beauty would be invested into, that then sat on shelves collecting dust because it was too complicated for anyone to be able to use as an everyday decision-making filter. And we know that the organizations, whether they're startups or they're 90-year-old companies, that can get down to that one page, it's sometimes really hard for people to imagine that their entire business can be boiled down to that one page. But why is it, Barry? Why is it that all businesses, regardless of how big they are, how complex they are, how long they've been in business, can get that one page?
How is it that they can get it? It's the $64 million question. Every business needs it, and every business will do better, I believe, with clarity. There's a number of, we have an approach that we use with clients to help them take all the complexity. I mean, you take a highlights for children, and I know that we've talked about this many times, a business that's been around for so many years, that had many beliefs and many different pieces of content and language and ways of describing their business and ways of thinking, and it became quite complex, so that new employees or deciding on new initiatives became more difficult because, well, which piece of information do we use to think about this thing? So we're always looking to take the complex and make it as simple as possible. And we think and we believe that businesses are based around universal truths, things that people need, things that are meaningful to people. And when we can distill complexity down into that meaning, then it makes life very, not just easy, but it makes life more inspiring and exciting and certainly impactful. So we always start, don't we, with engaging stakeholders, engaging employees and customers in discussion and conversation to understand what's important to them. What do they stay awake at night thinking about? What occupies their mind? What are the things that they need? What are the things that drive them? And we're always looking to get a deeper understanding of people's needs beyond what that business is selling, because we know that the thing that's being sold is just a vehicle towards some universal need: safety, love, belonging, comfort, community, whatever it might be. So we're looking to understand what people's needs are so that we can compare the needs of our stakeholders with the things that are true to us as a business internally, like the things we stand for as a business, our unique set of skills, our resources, our vision, maybe our belief on the world we'd like to see. So we're looking for that intersection of the things that are important to those people that we serve and the things that we're good at. And right there in the middle, we can find a building block. It might be the purpose, the why, it might be the vision, it might be the beliefs, but there's always one central kind of cornerstone to that meaningful story, that one pager. So it is a lot of turning over stones and prodding and poking, so that when somebody says, oh yeah, I think that's a great company, we ask why and why and why and why. And we don't ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with this company? Because we know that if they say 7, well, we don't know what to do with that. Right. Is that good? Is it bad? Should it have been 9? Would 2 have been good? We don't know. Yeah. So I think it's a process, isn't it, of discovery and constantly questioning until we can get to this point where we feel, you know what, we're in a bigger business than just selling a thing. Yeah. We are the catalyst or the vehicle towards a greater truth.
And isn't it interesting? There's something about constantly questioning and poking and prodding, but also listening. There's a way to observe and listen that is open as opposed to closed. Right. I was on a call with one of our clients. So, Barry, you and I committed very early on in this business that we would dedicate a certain amount of our time to pro bono work every year. And so we can find and we seek out those those nonprofits that we believe in, and we dedicate our time. So I was on the phone with an organization here in Central Ohio called Kids That Compost, and they've just launched. They're incredibly successful already. They, as a result of their incredible work and some of the work that we did together to help them define their story, they just won a $50,000 grant from the Ohio EPA, which was the largest grant that was made out of $250,000 that was available to be granted. So we're just so thrilled for them. But we were going through an exercise last week of really looking at the words that their customers, their clients, and their stakeholders used over and over and over again in those interviews, and looking for the words that came up more often, and trying to tease out the words that our stakeholders used rather than the words that we use. So why was that important? Why do we always focus on listening as much as possible when we're doing those stakeholder interviews?
Because we're not the ones with the answers. The business, the leaders are. They have all the answers already. They're just the words, the language, the clarity is lost in the day-to-day complexity and firefighting and constantly having to be reactionary in business. So we always talk about how we're not going to write the story of the business. It's already there. Our job is just to help uncover it and excavate it from underneath the clay that has built up over the weeks, months, and years. So that's, I think, there's a lot of listening where we have lots of open-ended questions, don't we? Where we're just looking for somebody to talk, to just keep going, just keep talking about the business. We'll tee up the questions, but we want you to tell us why you're passionate. Why did you start this business? What got you out of bed? What made you quit your job to start this? What made you take so many risks? And invariably, when we ask those questions and we just sit back and let the founder, the owner, the CEO talk, they'll share such gold with us. They'll share, and we'll pick on a word, or we'll pick on two words, and we'll say, aha, tell me more about that, because that's incredible. And normally they'll skirt or they'll scrape and kind of just be tangential to that universal truth that actually is the thing that people are looking for. And we'll find that little bridge, or we'll help them see, aha, isn't that the thing you're really in the business of? So the listening is critical, because how could we possibly have all the answers? You know, our job is to help others have the answers. And I know we've had conversations with clients in the past where they've said, well, you're going to solve all this for us, aren't you? I said, no, we're going to solve it together, because you have the answers. Yeah. You just maybe haven't been asked the right questions. Yeah. And so that's, I think, where our role comes into it.
Yeah, looking for that, for helping other people find the meaning that already exists.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of the, we talk often about purpose washing or marketing. There's often a desire, especially in times of crisis, to think, all right, we need a PR campaign, we need a marketing campaign. What's our spin? How are we going to spin this? One of the things I think we've observed over the years is that there's no such thing as spin. We cannot be sold to as the people. We're far too sophisticated. We see through that stuff. What we need to do is find those authentic, relevant connections and package it in meaning that really exists, that's relevant and authentic to who you are, and help to communicate that to make those connections between people.
I think it's the difference between a campaign and a purpose. The easy thing to do is to fire up your marketing agency or your marketing team to say, okay, times are tough, we need a campaign. But oftentimes those campaigns, and we've experienced this, and I have seen this in the marketing world myself, these campaigns are not necessarily based in the long-term or inspired by or informed by the long-term vision of the business, but rather by maybe something that is cool, that could be done, that takes advantage of something topical, that uses very nice words and clever words, or a clever sequence or animation, or whatever it might be. A campaign is a very different thing than a purpose, because the purpose is about this 20-year thing we're about to embark on, this journey that we're going to embark on, this pilgrimage over the next 20, 30 years. A campaign is something that should support that, not be disconnected from it. So the easy thing would be to say, we need more marketing. And our pushback is always, no, you need more meaning. And the marketing will help. The marketing will provide you with the channels to put that meaning out into the world. But the marketing itself, just the choice of channels or the use of channels alone won't be the solution. If there's one thing that I could look back on in 20 years' time, and be proud of, it's that we moved away from an emphasis on marketing and we moved towards an emphasis on meaning, because it's what we're yearning, it's what we're craving, and it's what businesses have such an ability to help and to provide. And those that are standing out are those that have hit on the meaning and they're mattering. They're not marketing.
Yeah. It's forgetting all that stuff we think we know about business and stopping using words like consumer, which disconnects us from the humanity of who we are as business people and who we are as customers. You could say that selling things is the oldest profession in the world, right? I have something that you want and I'm going to sell it to you. It's meeting a need, it's fulfilling a need or a desire or a want that people have. And when we can think back to those philosophical and physiological basis of what business is, it's filling a need and creating meaning for people. So we're, as human beings, we're just meaning-making machines. That's what we do all day. We look for meaning, we seek it out. Sometimes we see it where it doesn't exist. But if we can tap into that natural human need for meaning, we've tapped into something universal.
And there's a pyramidal approach to this. We often reference the hierarchy for needs that people have, Maslow's famous hierarchy for needs, that until our basic needs are met, we can't be thinking about self-actualization and deeper thoughts until we're fed and housed and safe. And so pandemics have a tendency to change the landscape a little bit. And for many, the basic needs now might be different, or the needs that our employees or our customers have are different today than they were a week or a month ago. So it doesn't mean that we're always focused on this the highest truth of all, of this self-actualization, or it's that we're constantly aware that people's needs must be met up this pyramid.
Yeah.
So if housing or if job security is taken away, what can we do to meet that need? And how are we thinking about those that we serve beyond just our needs for profitability?
Yeah. We have a question that's come through while we've been talking from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. So what are your general thoughts or even recommendations that we might have for nonprofit cultural institutions like museums? These are, in a sense, businesses that have place-based value propositions of educating the public. And this mission is very challenged during this time, as most place-based value is. What do you anticipate or suggest for owning this narrative and recovering from the financial stress that has already required mass layoffs for these organizations to survive? So thank you for asking that, Michelle. Yes, we are, as people who really love our nonprofit customers and clients and friends, we are very attuned and aware to how difficult and challenging this is right now, especially for place-based organizations. I think there are probably two things that I would say, and then I'll kick it over to Barry for his thoughts. One is, I've been so interested by watching cultural institutions rethink how they deliver the value that they deliver. So if we think about a museum as delivering value of a place, of a building where artwork is housed, and people come to that building to view that artwork, then obviously a situation like we're in today would remove the ability to deliver that value. But if we can think one or two levels above, so the how of what we do is place-based, is museum-based, but the why of what we do, is it enrichment? Is it connecting with our own humanity? Is it providing people an escape, or helping people to be more curious and more thoughtful about the world around them, and doing that through art? How could we deliver that in ways that are perhaps different than place-based? So we've seen some really interesting things in the last couple of weeks. So we've seen institutions do, I know even the Columbus Museum of Art here, where I'm based in Columbus, Ohio, has done virtual tours. I've seen organizations, art-based organizations, similar to Highlights, thinking about where those needs exist. So if parents used to bring their kids to the museum on Sundays, we know that those kids can't leave their house right now. How could we deliver that experience for kids and for parents and meet a need that they have, which is for homeschooling, for occupying their children, for getting their children to focus on something for a half an hour or an hour so that they can take a nap or clean the dishes or do the laundry. So there may be different hows, different strategies that we can employ to fulfill that same purpose that we have. There's also something interesting, and this is, again, to Barry's point earlier, difficult when you're trying to keep the lights on, when revenue has dropped to near zero. But are there ways to expand your audience? Are there ways to deliver something for free that provides value, but also expands the number of people who are exposed to your institution, your organization? Give them something for free and then ask them to pay for something that you've already proven is a value. So we've seen that with theaters, with musicians, with musical engagements. There's also something interesting about looking for those win-win-win opportunities. So you'll see there's a logo on our screen that's Can't Stop Columbus, which is an organization that gave us the idea to do these office hours. And one of the programs that they've launched recently is a program that brings music to seniors who are unable to leave their homes. They put musicians in the back of pickup trucks. They drive the pickup trucks to the front of the house, and then they deliver concerts. So Curbside Concerts is the name of the program. It both gives the musicians an opportunity to fulfill their purpose and the need that they have to be out there, potentially getting tips and getting revenue, and also serves a need in the community to bring joy to seniors who are in lock-in. So I think there's some creative ways to think about it, even as we know that things like layoffs and furloughs have been necessary at the same time.
It's a really stressful time for place-based businesses that have relied entirely on somebody coming in the door and handing over money, be it for a ticket, a performance, a meal, a drink. And now that only truth that has ever been known as this means for extracting income from those that we serve is gone, or is perhaps temporarily unavailable to us. So I absolutely empathize with the stress and the challenges of that. Haley's got a great point about the creative thinking around reimagining what it would mean to live up to our greater purpose or greater vision. Museums don't exist to sell tickets. They've sold tickets so that something else can happen. And they've used the building and the ability of people to get to the building as a way to take money so that something else can happen. But this something else is what's most interesting to me. And for every institution, business, nonprofit or for-profit, that other thing varies. It's different for everybody. But we know from our work with museums and from conversations we've had with art institutions and nonprofits that they are trying to connect people to deeper things. They're trying to, for example, we've had great conversations in the past with the museum where they talked about the benefit of immersion in art. No matter what your background is, where you come from, what your socioeconomic position is, art can change who you are and how you think. And how museums have been able to facilitate that change is by bringing people into a building. But if the purpose is to change how people think and to alter the mind and to give us different perspectives on the world, if the building is taken away, does that mean that we stop? Does that mean that we're done, that we can no longer help people have a new perspective because of art? And I would argue that it doesn't. I would absolutely 100% agree that it makes things much more difficult in the short term because our entire ecosystem is based around the place and the ticket, etc. But I know, for example, in the restaurant industry and the bar industry, a similar thing is happening where their place has been taken away and their access has been taken away. And some of them have closed their doors and said, well, that's it for me. I'm out of business now. And others have tried to think about, well, how can they still help people socialize? And there are bars and restaurants doing things like they are live streaming, or they are doing Instagram lives and also making available food and drinks for takeout, so that people can take out that food and then sit at the table and meet other customers virtually while they eat that food and drink their drinks. And that's a small contribution towards the needs that people have, and also keeping the lights on. But there's no way a month ago a restaurant or a bar would have thought of ever doing something like that. So I wonder, for the likes of a museum, if there's two opportunities. The first is, we now, as Haley mentioned, we now have access to an audience that up to now would never have seen the inside of our organization, or inside of our building. For example, I have been to the Guggenheim in New York, but I also toured it last week virtually, and I went and saw a floor that I hadn't seen before. Now I'm exposed to that floor in the Guggenheim, and I didn't have to go to New York. What can we do in museums or in other businesses to help a wider audience see behind the scenes, or get exposed to maybe something that they hadn't seen before? The second is, how can we rethink how to make sure that greater purpose or that greater vision is delivered? The building is temporarily unavailable. Ticket sales are temporarily unavailable. Furloughs have happened. Layoffs have happened. Are there other ways to generate revenue? Could that be through partnerships? Could that be through sales of something? That's where I think that one eye on the present, while also keeping one eye on the future and the real purpose and vision we have, I think is going to be, that's where the opportunity lies, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting point about aligning your thinking about profitability and revenue with your purpose and your vision. So we have another comment that comes to us actually from Paris, France, from Kiernan Murphy. Thank you for joining us, Kiernan, who says some art galleries are now diverting their budgets from grand spectacles to supporting artists who are being really majorly hit by the economic issues of the moment. That's a great point, Kiernan. We're seeing that as you are overseas in Europe, we're seeing that here in the States, that organizations are really thinking about why they exist and for whom they exist, and finding ways to invest the revenue or the profitability that they have in those core key stakeholders. So we're seeing that here, whether it's with some of the work of the Can't Stop Columbus group here in Columbus, Ohio, thinking about ways that they can support artists who are being hit by these economic issues. So there's an event here in my neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, called Gallery Hop, that happens once a month, and all of the galleries put on new shows, and there are openings. And about I can't remember when, with the last first Saturday of the month, this neighborhood actually put on a virtual gallery hop. So they found a way virtually through Instagram and through Facebook to provide their artists with that exposure, with the audience, and with the opportunity to sell their artwork. Another great arts organization that's an Instagram channel called Columbus Collects, which is a channel that is there to promote not just art collecting in general and the accessibility of art collecting to people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, but also to promote local art and local artists. And they are doing this week a takeover of their Instagram channel, where they're actually highlighting art that people have purchased while they're on lockdown. So showing that that it is still possible to support artists and to buy art during this time. And your question, Kiernan, reminded me of a conversation that we had a couple of years ago. We worked with an organization, a nonprofit organization here in Columbus, that's Stonewall Columbus, which is an LGBTQ organization dedicated to supporting that community. And they were mostly at the time known for one thing, and that was throwing the Pride Parade and the Pride March here in Columbus. And it was such a core part of their identity, both as who they were known, what they were known for, and who they thought they were, that it was getting in the way of them thinking 2 or 3 levels up. So Michelle mentioned in her comment earlier that the mission of these cultural institutions is threatened. And that is true. The strategies that they have employed are completely under threat. And the fact that they're highly, highly focused on just that mission alone is a massive risk and a weakness in the organization. So to get ourselves out of that, with Stonewall Columbus, this was 4 years ago, I posed a very important question to their leadership team. I said, imagine, and it's funny to think about this in hindsight, but I said, imagine that the administration of the US government comes out tomorrow with a proclamation that says, due to terrorist threats, we are eliminating the possibility for gatherings of over 30 people. What would you do? And at the time, this question seemed absolutely ridiculous, that this could never possibly happen. They would never be able to shut down the parades like this or marches like this. It's such an incredible part of who we are as Americans and how we express ourselves and how we protest and how we tell the government what's important to us. But the question was provocative just because of that reason. I wanted them to think beyond their mission, beyond this core strategy or strategies that they believed needed to be executed excellently so that they could fulfill some higher purpose, so that they could realize some larger vision. So the ability to ask that question and to really think through it unlocked for them some insights about why they really existed. Why were they here in the first place? Were they here for a party? Was it about the Pride Parade? And it brought up a lot of conversations about the fact that it wasn't really a parade, it was a march. And that the original Pride Parade here in Columbus were people marching in the street, 30 or 40 people with bags over their heads because they couldn't have their faces shown on television. So it brought up questions of beliefs and what they stood for that helped them unlock some really important insights about who they were and why they existed. And then after we had those insights, we could talk about strategies and talk about and think about new and potentially innovative strategies that we didn't have before.
Yeah, those are great points and great examples, Stonewall being a particularly good one. So let me see. We've got a comment here from Lost Radicals, our friend Dave Barber. Just launched a collection of t-shirts. Nice squeeze in of a little bit of advertising there, Dave. You've elbowed that in well. The Benefit Ohio artists via the Greater Columbus Arts Council. What advice do you have on communicating with other creatives that motivates them to help spread the message of support?
Mm-hmm.
Should we answer that, or should we charge Dave for our time because it's advertising ploy? No, Dave, we love what you're doing, and I saw you sharing this yesterday. It is right now Haley and I have had this conversation that we're seeing a lot of marketing messages that are tone deaf, and we're seeing a lot of clutter and noise out there. And Haley, you shared a great video with me during the week of big brands who have scrambled to put together advertising in this time, and every one of them starts with some moody piano music and then swiftly moves into, for the last 80 years we have served you, and every single brand says exactly the same thing. We're looking, I think people are looking for a little bit of hope, Dave. They're looking for meaning. They're looking for something that they can hold on to and that's relevant to them, that feels authentic, that feels relevant. They're looking for the people behind the businesses, not the businesses behind the people. It's interesting that you commented using Lost Radicals, but I know that there's a person behind this. I know there's a human. I know there's somebody that has an amazing love of music, who has an amazing love of community and sharing. And I wonder what you could do to bring the creative music community together through your brand, or what could you do to connect people, knowing that they have. It won't just be about what can we do to sell more t-shirts, but also what could we do to help those, in addition to what the Greater Columbus Arts Council is doing. What could we do to help singers and musicians right now? So I would put it back on you, Dave, and challenge you to think about ways that we could address, whether it's isolation or funding or community or whatever it is that our musicians are missing and lacking and needing right now. And I wonder what role you could play right in the middle there, knowing the skills you have, and in addition the resources that you have and the product that you have. Yeah. What would you add to that, Haley?
Yeah, I think the authenticity is really important. We often, especially those of us that love brands, love to get behind brands and think about brands and think about how we're expressing our brand through our logos and our identity. But you're right. Knowing the founder and entrepreneur behind Lost Radicals, that founder and entrepreneur, Dave, has an incredible network of musicians and artists and other people in the creative space here in Columbus. And you hold a significant amount of weight in your voice, and so do they. So think about how you can engage those people in delivering a very authentic message about this support that GCAC is offering to artists and how Lost Radicals is trying to help. As you think about your stakeholders, who are the other people who share the same beliefs that you have in the power of music and the power of art to change lives, and the need that we have right now as people who love art and benefit from art, the need that we have to support art and to support artists. So there are probably some other stakeholders that exist in your Lost Radical stakeholder map that you might think about to help you spread that message. So the first one that comes to mind is Randy Sharma and the Rock Dot Chronicles. So you've got someone who loves music and talks about music on a national stage and a national platform. I think he'd be a great person to help you spread the word.
I'd be curious to know, Dave, how you could, or curious to think, and maybe challenge you to think about, how can you hero the musicians and the music community, and how can you rally support for them rather than just having them rally support for what you're doing? I think there's an opportunity to be that convener, that grand convener, where you're bringing people together. I would be wondering how to support, and I know you're doing this already. You have a collection of t-shirts that is directly benefiting artists, but what else could we do to bring attention to them, their plight? There's nobody able to walk into a bar and open up the guitar case this week and this month, and that's a huge challenge. So I wonder what role Lost Radicals plays in bringing an audience to the artists that don't have access to it, and using your network, to Haley's point, to help maybe showcase them, knowing that, or maybe considering, or at least accepting that the sale of the t-shirts may be the longer game and may happen as a result of this convening, rather than the sale of the t-shirts leading to the convening and leading to that inspiration and hope. So maybe flipping it, I would maybe flip that thought a little bit and think about, what do artists need right now? And how can you help beyond what you're doing with the Greater Columbus Arts Council? So great question. Thanks for that, Dave. We will wear Lost Radicals t-shirts on our next live stream if you send them to us. Okay, so I don't think we've any more questions right now. We have had a marathon office hour session of 47 minutes. We're going to do these every Wednesday and Friday. Look, it's a challenging time, but business has never had more opportunity, and I think an obligation to think beyond this week and next week. I say that, and it seems like that's that seems like an easy thing to say. It is an easy thing to say, but there's one eye that's needed constantly on keeping the lights on, but that other eye needs to be looking towards the future to think about that impact, that vision, the purpose. The reason you set up this business in the first place most likely hasn't changed. How you go about getting there has. Museums are closed, place-based businesses are struggling. What will we have to do today on a day-to-day basis? And for the past 6 years in Storyforge, we've always talked about purpose and vision being 20-year statements and 20-year goals. And the mission, the day-to-day strategies and tactics will always change based on market conditions and resources and moving goalposts. Well, we have our moving goalposts now. What are we going to do differently? And what are we going to rethink and reimagine, knowing that we're not going to abandon our vision, and there's no way we're abandoning our purpose. We're in this for the long haul. So we're going to be here every Wednesday and Friday to support you in that. If anybody would benefit from a conversation outside of our office hours, go to storyforge.co and you can schedule a call with us, and we'd be happy to take as much time as is needed to help you think through this and maybe come up with a plan on the phone for your own business, so that maybe you've got more hope and optimism for how you can get closer to your vision and your purpose. Haley, do you have any parting thoughts, or will we leave people on that note?
No, I think that's it. A big thank you to everyone for joining us, for sending us your questions, and for reaching out and helping each other. I think in times like this, all of us in business need to be in business, in the arts, in whatever industry we're in, need to be reaching out as much as we can to our clients, our partners, our competitors, folks in our community, and seeing what we can do to help. So thank you for being a part of this Storyforge Office Hours live community, and join us again on Friday. New conversations every week.
If you know of any business owners, leaders, CEOs, founders who you think would benefit from these office hours, from hanging out with us on a Wednesday and Friday, from chatting, from listening to maybe perhaps our approach that we've used with other clients, please share this live stream with them. Share the link to our Stories and Sips Facebook page, Storyforge Facebook page, and our Storyforge YouTube channel. And we'd love to have more conversations with as many founders and CEOs as possible, because look, we have an opportunity to connect remotely and virtually to a wider audience than maybe ever before. And I think now is the time for us all to get together, make a plan, and get closer to that vision and purpose. So please share, and then come back and join us on Friday. And we'll see you at 11 a.m. Eastern. And thanks everyone for joining.